It's the Full Force Movie News Burst, brought to you by GeneralsJoes Reborn.com, with me, Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic80. Joining me to discuss some very recent Snake Eyes movie concept art is the General himself, Justin GeneralsJoes Bell. For today's episode, we are venturing back to 2018 and well before the Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins movie had started filming, specifically to the concept art stage of the process. Now, just a few days ago, Volta revealed concept art they had developed for the film back in 2018, which clearly takes inspiration from what Hasbro and more importantly Lenny Panzica had been working on prior to Classified's release in 2020. And there's a few interesting homages thrown in, as well as a mind-boggling conundrum that we had been trying to figure out from back in 2021. But you'll have to stick with us to find out what that is. Justin, first, let's get stuck into these concepts one at a time, starting with this piece that is evidently from the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fascinating to kind of revisit some of this concept art, because a lot of time, I mean, it's popular to say, oh, the concept arts are always better than the movie. I don't know if that's always the case, but I think
always the case, is it?
There's this tendency that, well, we didn't get it, so automatically it's better.
Yeah, it's the unreleased paradox, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We can't have it, so by that very definition, we desire it more. But I mean, I think in all fairness, what we see in this artwork, it really is quite a few steps ahead of kind of the final product that ended up on screen. I think, at least from a design perspective, in my opinion, of course. I mean, obviously it's all opinion based, but I'm certainly, a lot of what I'm seeing here is stuff that I would have loved to have seen kind of translated to live action. I think elements of that were carried over into the film. I mean, you did have sort of the assassin or whatever using those dice, and that reference did sort of carry through with his nickname. But just I really like kind of the way they portrayed that in this particular concept art, and sort of the little hint of the snake skin boots. It's kind of like, that could be a Cobra tie-in right there. But
I was quite interested in how, like, I know you were saying that obviously there's a lot better in here than what the actual Snake Eyes movie was. I was quite surprised at how well this, like, almost storyboarded the film a little bit. Like even like to the point of the way that they'd arranged these in the post, which you can check in the link, obviously in the description, guys. The Volta post originally, where they were like, here's the stuff we've worked on that we haven't been able to show until now, and everything in order. It's kind of like, oh wow, like you can see where everything is in the actual film. But I'm with you on the fact that I kind of prefer what they're going for in the concept art and not really what was finally given to us, sort of thing.
Right.
Like, kind of, obviously that first one, obviously, it's very clearly the beginning of the film. Like, in this particular concept, Snake Eyes, the child, is hiding under the floorboards, as opposed to where he's like, I think he's in a bathroom, isn't he, originally? Like,
so he's in a separate room or something like that in the actual movie, I
think his dad throws him in the bathroom and then, like, kind of has the issue, obviously, in the living room. But then, so you don't really, like, I think this is kind of an more interesting and, like, definitely an even more ominous kind of way. But I guess,
like, it's happening right above him, like the floorboards, and the only thing separating him from the grisly stuff going on right there.
Like, there's a feeling of he can't do much about it, which is quite dark, isn't it, really, on that one? That's cool. And then obviously as we go through, we see, like, more of the film kind of evolving, and we see, like, that first kind of bare knuckle fight sort of thing. I say bare knuckle, but they're wrapped up, aren't they? But you've got that kind of, like, Snake Eyes versus this guy in this particular image. I'm just going to assume Snake Eyes is the one that we can see face on, or do you think it's the other guy? I can't really tell.
It's tough to tell. I mean, the other guy is heavily tattooed, which we didn't really see Snake Eyes wearing those tattoos.
No, you're right.
And of course, it's concept art, so I could almost see Snake Eyes being the other guy.
Yeah, I think you're right.
With sort of his shoulder turned towards us.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Kind of like, it's interesting, isn't it? How, like, with this one, I looked at it for a few times, and I was kind of like, okay, well, it's the fist fight in the. It's the Fight Club situation, isn't it? Which we can't talk about because it's Fight Club.
Well, interesting. I'm trying to remember. Was there a scene where Storm Shadow was in a fist fight alone, or was it Snake? It's weird.
Just Snake Eyes.
A few years since just Snake Eyes. All right. So we talked about this movie for like we talked nothing but this movie for 2 years, and then it came out, and I will admit I have not watched it recently, so some of
Yeah.
the specifics have sort of slipped out of my mind a little bit.
I don't blame you. It's one of those ones where at the time I definitely really enjoyed it, but
Yeah,
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 it falls short in so many areas, including, I will say, the whole like Snake Eyes as a likable character sort of scenario.
hmm
Like that's one of the main problems I think in the entire film.
they created this great redemption arc for him that he never actually redeemed
Redeemed? No,
himself for.
no,
It's like, okay, you made him feel like a bad guy. The point of the redemption arc is that he has that redemption, and then you kind of failed to let him have that redemption, and he just kind of left the film as being sort of a jerk.
yeah, you've got like
Yeah,
5 minutes for him to redeem himself, and he still can't do
yeah,
it in that time.
exactly.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is quite interesting and funny. Well, then we move into something that we just definitely don't really see at all
yeah,
in the film, and that's these kind of like medical scenes in like what looks to be like maybe the Himalayas in the background there, Justin.
yeah, something like that. Like if it's back, I could see this being a couple different things. I could see this being maybe a little bit more of a tie-in to Storm Shadow, like some of his recovery or something like that. I mean, the Himalayas kind of makes me think of the Arashikage
Yeah,
Temple
bit of
and stuff.
retaliation.
Yeah, and retaliation. But on the other hand, I think it would be kind of cool if that was like Snake Eyes on the table and something happened to his face, and that was kind of where they were sort of trying to repair him
Mm.
surgically, something that never really even happened in the movie. And I kind of, unfortunately, as I poked through a few more of these slides, I tried to see if Snake Eyes appeared unmasked in any future scenes from that, or if that could be confirmation that perhaps that was when he had his surgery. But it's kind of tough to tell. There are some scenes with some unmasked people, but on the other hand, was that Snake Eyes? Was it not Snake Eyes? I don't know. So
Plus,
this,
with it being concept art, you kind of can give them the benefit of the doubt that they're just
yeah,
throwing stuff at the wall in a sense. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. They could just be saying, well, maybe Snake Eyes gets disfigured, and this is what happens. Maybe we show him near the Arashikage Temple getting the surgery, but with no idea whether or not it would actually appear in the film, more or
Mm.
less where chronologically it might fall into place. So,
Again,
yeah,
yeah, I think you're right. I think this could be some sort of Snake Eyes situation. And again, this might have been like it's early in our list of images, but
right.
it could be meant for later on, if you know what I mean. Like it could be
Yeah, and of
following
course
the film or towards the end or something.
the comic fan in me wants to look at and I'm gonna butcher his last name, but in the Marvel comics there's a guy Dr. Hunkinter, I think, who was the
Huntkinder, yeah.
plastic surgeon.
Yeah.
Could that be the Alps in the background? Because Hunkinter lived near the
Oh,
Alps.
there
He
you
didn't,
go. There you
instead of
go.
the Himalayas. So maybe this was sort of a comic book tie-in where this is the Alps, not the Himalayas, and this is Dr. Hunkinter and his crew kind of performing some of that surgery.
I like it.
It could be a neat little
I
twist too.
like it. You've changed my mind twice now on two different images. I like it. So then we get to that stage where you kind of have your unmasked characters here, Justin, with what looks to be Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow fighting in the kind of fish market situation. And
Yep.
this kind of feels like a bit of a callback or a call out to that scene where the two kind of get together.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Where Snake Eyes was kind of working at that fish market, and they, sort of joined back up together after, being separated for a little while.
What I would also say is I kind of like how the bad guys look in this. Kind of
Yes.
almost a little bit like rockabilly, some of them with weird hair and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
they've got like the guy nearest sort of the camera is cool, his long coat, and he's got like a battering ram in his right hand, and yeah, it's really kind of an interesting aesthetic that they were going with. That I'm not really sure where the concept artist was getting this from. I mean, I'm assuming it was still all about the Yakuza and stuff. They
Yeah.
definitely have this really cool different look to them,
Like the
and
neutrinos from the Teenage Mutant Ninja
yeah,
Turtles.
yeah, exactly. And what I love about some of this concept art too is that, I mean, this is not necessarily unique to this one slide. Like you see like kind of these really kind of, different design aesthetics kind of throughout, whereas the Snake Eyes movie itself was kind of a little bit vanilla, looked very real
Yeah.
world. There wasn't
Yeah.
really a lot of that cool kind of cyberpunk sort of stuff
Yeah.
going on. The concept art has it all over the place. It
So
definitely looks like.
I'm guessing that's Kenta with the big blade on his wrist, basically,
That's what
from
I'm
the movie.
thinking. Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Yeah, facing off against the two of them.
Interesting that his kind of character is a little on this in the concept art seems a little bit younger and
Yep.
has like this weird weapon, kind of like what looks like a Wolverine type. Maybe
I know.
what we were seeing on that previous medical one, because it did look a little bit like Wolverine stuff was being done on the old
Yep.
wrists.
That's
Maybe,
true. Yeah, they've actually his arm is really focused in that X-ray sort of thing. Yeah.
and it kind of looked like they were not putting adamantium on it, but that's kind of what I was the vibe I was getting. I wonder if
Yep.
they were like implanting that weapon into his wrist.
That's a cool idea. Those are some really awesome sort of storyline things that just sort of
Or
vanished entirely.
or they created a new fish weapon for Storm Shadow, which you can see coming out of his wrist as
That's
well.
right. His hand kind of opens up and a fish comes right out of it. Yeah, there you go. Either that or
Uh,
maybe Kenta's blades are fish hooks. Like maybe he's supposed to go to the fish market to help kind of
yeah.
catch the fish, but instead, yeah, that's there you go.
What is interesting on this one, I'm not sure if you noticed this, but there's a cheeky little what looks to be kind of night creeper hiding in the rooftops. Did you notice that before?
Yeah, a little black uniform with
Yeah.
those silver goggles kind of peering down over them. That's a neat little touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. These art these pieces of artwork have like all this stuff sort of scattered throughout. It's kind of cool.
It did make you kind of like look at all of the different things that were in each individual image. And the next one,
Absolutely.
I couldn't find anything specific, but there's some really cool like detail in this one of like you've got these kind of really interesting like almost like cyborg like ninja people,
Yeah.
and then you've got these huge like I guess like the kind of sumo size kind of guys who are like
Yep.
the I'm guessing security for. And again, this screams to me of that scene where Snake Eyes meets up with Kenta,
Yep.
and in that like what was it? It was like a hot tub sort. What are they called? Like a bathhouse.
Bathhouse.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And
Yeah, I definitely see that.
one thing I did notice in the background on the screen, it looks like some sort of satellite in orbit over a planet.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it does. You do see some kind of technical sort of stuff kind of on that, yeah, multi-paneled screen behind Kenta. It's pretty cool. Yeah, and yeah, there's certainly something orbiting around. Looks a little like the little railgun launchers in
Yeah,
Retaliation too, to be honest with you. It does kind of have that look and feel to it.
I wonder if there was an attempt by the concept art team here to implement elements from the
I bet.
previous film to
Yeah,
almost like give it like because they probably weren't they probably at that point didn't really know whether they were going to be
right.
like a standalone film or if it was going to be a reboot or something. So yeah, that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah, I
Um,
like that a lot.
yeah, and again, I look at that character in the middle of the shot, not Snake Eyes, who I'm guessing that is,
Right.
getting the snakeskin boots or whatever. Maybe this is Kenta telling Snake Eyes that these are the boots that guy was wearing at the beginning that killed your
Could
dad.
be.
So this is the kind of Snake Eyes dice sort of scenario in this case, isn't
Yep.
it?
Very much could be. Yep, that's a good call out because they definitely look like the same sort of pattern boots that we saw in that first shot. Yeah.
Yeah, so because I know in that scene he gives him the dice, doesn't he, at that point, and
Yep.
says, we've got him, basically. So yeah, so he knows that he's gonna, if he completes his mission, he gets that kind of retribution sort of thing,
Yep.
on the guy that killed his dad. Now,
Exactly.
and again, I will say that I'd love to see that character that's kind of on the side to Snake Eyes,
Yeah.
and the one at the back and the other side, on the left hand side. I'd like to see those in like some sort of action figure form because
I
they look
know.
cool.
Yeah. They're definitely not just sort of normal, ninja, so to speak. There's some technology there, some kind of really cool kind of, dagger straps or something like that integrated into the uniform. Yeah, it's great that they really kind of thought outside the box for some of this stuff, and a little bit of a shame that we didn't get any of that kind of carried through to the final film.
Yeah, I totally, absolutely agree with you on that. So yeah, that's that one. Then we move on to this shot, which is kind of like, was it Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow kind of like sparring or fighting, or
Yep.
maybe this is part of his, I don't know what you'd call it.
the,
Maybe
the
like,
trials
yeah,
or
like,
whatever. They may
yeah,
have the trials to
yeah.
become an Arashikage ninja.
Definitely. So this is another one where you kind of looking at, and I kind of like what they did here with this tech mixed with tradition.
Oh yeah,
That's kind of fun,
totally.
and almost like the blind master is like keyed into it, and he can see it in like
Yep.
in inside maybe, because his eyes are lit up. It's
I know. And Snake Eyes has these like rockets in his heels or something like that, like it's helping him jump. I mean, oh man, they really lost some of that. There was a lot of great inspiration in here, kind of this blend of technology and martial arts that really would have made it at least seem a little bit different instead of just a standard, ninja movie. I think bringing in some of that stuff would have been really, really cool touch, and unfortunately, and I don't want to spend this whole time just harping on the movie how it ended up, but yeah, I mean this would have been really cool to see this kind of in live action, the kind of cool effects they could have done with some of those like
I,
jet thrusters and some of the technology and stuff.
they should have gone deeper into the tech and less into the kind
Yes,
of mystical stuff, because the mystical stuff kind of really took
100%.
you out of it a little bit, like
Yeah, the whole
giant
the
magical
heart and the big
snakes.
snake, and
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean that was like because they did have some of this technology in other places, and really the kind of ramming it hard against the mysticism side of things just was like a square peg in a round hole. It didn't
yeah,
really fit. I think if they'd leaned into technology from beginning to end, gotten that snake out, gotten that,
yeah.
make something different out of that heart or whatever they called it,
Oh, the
some like make
stone.
it
Yeah, yeah.
the stone, yeah, make it like an EMP device or something different,
Well,
than
that's the
just
thing.
a magic rock,
You could. I mean, the next one, because we're not. I mean, we're not seeing a load of homage, but there is a nice little kind of shot. And it looks like they've kind of kept the RZA a little bit in this shot. If you look to all
Yeah,
the way to the right, with the kind of the kind of hat and the kind of definitely the color that he wore, that kind of black and yellow.
yeah, totally.
And I guess again, I think it's more like I'm not saying that is the RZA, because
Right.
he played the Blind Master in the Retaliation movies, obviously, but maybe they
Yeah,
were kind of just again like loosely keeping some of those elements
exactly.
into this stuff. Yeah. What I would say as well, I think if they'd have utilized the science and the tech as the mysticism explained, that would
Yeah,
have made more sense and grounded it a lot more, I think, as well.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then speaking of the tech aspect, these are my favorite shots actually, because in here they go nuts with the homage.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now we have the shot of like this would have been Snake Eyes basically stealing the stone, and in this the concept art makes it way more kind of, I don't know, mystical and intriguing, but at the same time with this science element that almost gives it the explanation of why it's mystical.
Yeah. And really, they obviously they must have gotten this from somewhere. I mean, at some point, this was part of the movie. I mean, and we'd heard those rumors about how they were tying these franchises together because yeah, you kind of see the mysticism. And for anybody who hasn't caught on yet, I mean, you see the stone, but then off to the right, you see what's clearly is a piece of Visionaries armor from the Visionaries toy line. It's Leoric
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
kind of in this glass chamber, and you kind of wonder, the holographic, the way this is kind of glowing and spinning. It just really seems like a lost opportunity to if they were going to lean into some of sort of that mystic science sort of element. And that's really what Visionaries is about. Visionaries is this blend between science and magic. I mean,
yeah,
that's basically what the whole philosophy was built around. And I think Snake Eyes at some point gets a little bit, you know, gets a little bit too mystic and not enough science. And
yeah.
so I think, that connection doesn't work as well. But clearly this was something that they were going for at some point. And I mean, somebody told them to put this in there. So I think it's really cool to kind of see these threads of what might have been and unfortunately what didn't happen.
Mm. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely that element there that really looks very cool.
yeah. So you got Leoric from the Visionaries, kind of really, kind of like very prominent in this particular image, and
Yep.
Bludgeon as well, snuck in there too
Oh, that's true.
from the
Kind of off to the
Transformers.
back
Yeah,
in that samurai mask.
yeah.
Samurai helmet's got the clear skull mask and armor there too. Yep, that's a very good call.
You
Yep.
you do get to see in the next shot, which is very from a different perspective, basically looking through Snake Eyes' visor. In the same kind of room, same layout and
Yep.
everything, and we get to see cool, like kind of this is cool because you get to see what the mask or the helmet heads up display is doing and showing him all these different things. And obviously
Yep.
he doesn't get the Snake Eyes gear until right at the end in the actual
Exactly.
film.
Yeah.
But
And
in
this
here, he's kind of getting it in order to steal this stone.
Yeah, and you can tell just by, the shot that, in at least one draft of the film, he got the stuff much earlier on.
Yeah,
There was no, it wasn't this like 2-minute cameo at the end, where he just kind of suddenly had the mask, and it kind of calls back to that technology aspect that we're kind of complaining about. Like he needed that visor and all the tech kind of there, to kind of further the story in certain places.
mm,
And one interesting thing I've been trying to kind of determine, and I don't really know if we've got a way to determine that. It's kind of just to our left of this Leoric screen. There's like a little figure back there, like a
Mate,
little
I have zoomed in on that. I've looked at it loads. I cannot, for the life of me,
yeah.
figure out what it is, but it
It's
looks
there for a
so
reason,
cool.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is. But and yeah, you get a better look at Bludgeon for sure in this other shot
Yep.
too, and all sorts
And
of kind of ancient weapons and
yeah, so you've got not only have you got Visionaries and Transformers in this one, but they've also snuck in Mask, and you've got Matt Tracker's gear
oh
up
yeah,
in the
yeah,
top left as well, which is
yeah.
absolutely insane.
It's yeah. I mean, oh, it's really cool to see the concept art for it, but on the other hand, it's kind of like a little bit of a lost opportunity. I
Hmm.
mean, it's just
Would it have been too on the nose to see stuff like this in the movie, do you think? Or, I
I think
mean,
it really depends. It depends if if this was just kind of like here's your cameo and
hmm,
that's it and that's all you get, then maybe it might have been a little bit too on the nose. If it actually had purpose for the story and things like that, I think it could have worked. I mean, that's a good point because I am the first one to complain about sort of nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, where you
right.
just kind of throw something stupid in there that's meaningless to the story just to get fanboys all fired up. And I complain about that, and then we see one art with Visionaries, and I'm like, oh, yay, dopamine, give it to me. But it's, yeah, and yeah, I think you make a good point. If it was kind of like he looks through the visor and sees this stuff, and everybody's like, oh, and then that's all, he moves on, does something else, you never see it again. It's kind of like, what was the point?
Yeah,
But,
sure.
I would think that if the concept artist got direction to include these things in there, it would be because they were sort of part of the story and not
Yeah.
just castaway items. But you never know. When Lorenzo de Bonaventura is involved,
Who knows?
who knows? Yeah, you never really can tell.
Next up, we have this kind of scene of Snake Eyes again, kind of jumping from like rooftop to rooftop on in the Arashikage kind of temple area, and this kind of signifies almost to me him escaping and being chased by Arashikage kind of
Yep.
soldiers and troops and so on and so forth. What is interesting about this particular shot, though, is the fact that we see the kind of like the Oni and the kind of masks, basically,
Yep.
that we see on the Blue Ninjas. And I did speak to Lenny about this, and I said, "Were you aware of of these kind of like concept art pieces and everything?" And he like hadn't seen. Well, I think he said he hadn't seen them for a long time, but he could confirm that obviously when it came to the classified designs that are utilized in these images, they are using those, like the classified came first basically. So Lenny's designs were done and then they utilized Hasbro materials in order to do some of these concepts, and some of those materials were the classified designs that Lenny and team were working on at around about, I think, just
Yep.
before 2018 and going into 2018. So that should, if people are thinking that classified took from these, it's the other way around in this particular sense.
For sure. Yeah, I think there's definitely some exchanging back and forth, and yeah, you can definitely see from some of the design elements here, how we ended up with some of what we ended up with in classified. That mask isn't just similar to the Blue Ninja mask; it's almost exactly the
Mm.
same. So I think it's pretty clear that there are some of the same folks were involved. One question that I have for you is that supposed to be Snake Eyes front and center, or are they only showing the Arashikage kind of in pursuit? Because looking closely at that kind of central figure in dark colors, that it bears very little resemblance to Snake Eyes. He's got the sort of bat gauntlets, which Snake Eyes has been seen wearing in other shots, but he's got like this weird red vest, and the mask is very animalistic. Like he's got a mouth on it and
Yeah,
kind of a sculpted
bright red
snout.
eyes. Yeah, yeah.
It's really bizarre. Like it does look like they are chasing that figure. So that figure might be Snake Eyes, and maybe this is just some sort of different way to approach the Snake Eyes character. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. It's a very big departure from any of the other Snake Eyes design aesthetics we've seen so far.
Definitely got a point there. I'm kind of only really going by what it looks like from a
Yeah,
storytelling perspective, if you know what I mean.
exactly. Yeah,
Which is funny
yeah,
because these aren't necessarily telling the same story or any story,
right.
really, other than just being maybe kind of like standalone
Yeah,
sort of elements. But Yeah, I think maybe it's just a bit of artistic interpretation, maybe on the
Yeah,
character. Or you're
makes
right;
sense.
they could all be Arashikage, and they could all be on their way to, basically, find Snake Eyes and capture him. And then, of course, we get the Storm Shadow shot here, which
I
is
love
pretty
this.
cool, isn't it? And it's like almost like him getting ready to go out and kick Snake Eyes' butt in a
Yeah.
sense, isn't it? Yeah,
Totally. And, as we mentioned in the last shot, the different classified inspirations and kind of trading back and forth with each other. I think one look at this Storm Shadow with his heavily tattooed arms and the Batman
gauntlets.
bladed
Yeah,
gauntlets
yeah.
on his right hand. Clearly, these were sharing some inspiration between classified and this, because this is absolutely what that first Storm Shadow kind of initially looked like when we first saw some of that artwork for the classified line. And I still hold out hope that someday maybe we'll get around to seeing that version of Storm Shadow in the actual classified line. But yeah, it's very clear that some inspiration was had there, and it really just is unfortunate, because this version of Storm Shadow would have rocked in live action. I think he would have looked really cool, instead of sort of the same old kind of
Yep.
trench coat, white suit look that we've seen several times already. I really
Very.
think this would have been a fantastic rendition of him.
They
And
always make Storm Shadow. They always hinder the crap out of his out
yeah,
of his movement, don't they? Like they always put him in
yeah,
that massive, like heavy leather gear. And I feel like this would be so much cooler, so much more
yes,
practical. Yeah, he's got like kind of wrap around his neck and everything, but still, I'm sure like it doesn't hinder his movement like around and everything. Like
exactly,
just having, yeah, I love the sleeveless design and the opportunity to see those tattoos,
yeah,
and I think that's a really cool, yeah. And again, taking heavily from that website, we call him website Storm Shadow, but it's effectively the, I want to say evergreen, but I always get pelters for that in the comments. But anyway, yeah, so that was a pretty clear shout out to that. Then we
yes,
have this scene, which is interesting. This is almost like, like how in the movie it was Snake Eyes delivering the stone to Kenta in
yeah,
like in on the side of a thing, like a pier somewhere, like the mid, like
right.
outside. This kind of is, I don't know, more interesting to me in this environment.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's you definitely see that it's still kind of Kenta, because the
Yeah,
guy on the left hand side definitely is Kenta, still has that blade kind of on his arm as he did in the earlier film. So, when I first saw this, I'm like, oh, are these the good guys? Because there you see this guy on kind of the right hand side who's got this armor and these grenade straps. It looks like he might almost be a GI Joe character or a military character, but clearly it's still Kenta's crew.
yeah, because he's got the Oni mask on, the Japanese mask on his face.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a much more interesting image, I think, than what we got in the final version, and again leans into that technology aspect that we never really saw in the final film. I mean, we saw hints of it, but we didn't
Yeah.
see it in such blatant degrees as we do see it here.
And we see an unmasked Snake Eyes here, so this probably is your biggest kind of hint yet that
Yeah,
he didn't get disfigured. And I
exactly.
wonder if that guy on the table is actually Kenta getting some sort of knife implanted in his wrist or something.
Yeah. Yep, totally. Yep, that definitely leans back to this, because these could be the same people that we saw in that earlier shot, just from sort of different angles or whatever. Yep.
Then we get this really interesting series of images. We'll start with this first one where it looks like, I don't know, it looks like Snake Eyes or Storm Shadow maybe fighting against a Kiko here. And this, I'm guessing a Kiko as well, because we don't really see, we see this character a little bit towards the end as well, the female character, but this is the first
Yeah.
time I think we've seen her in the, unless it's the same character that's wearing the fox kind of mask
Oh
in
yeah, it
some of those
could
other
be. Yep.
shots. But yeah, like this is an interesting one, isn't it? Rooftop kind of battle,
Yep.
fireworks in the distance, and it's going to lead into something even more interesting. I think we should just jump to the next one, honestly, unless you've got
Let's do it.
anything to say about this one.
No, I think it's tough to say exactly what. I mean, that's definitely Kiko in the foreground, but it's pretty unclear about who that might be in the background. It could be any of the people you mentioned, though. Though his face is kind of odd; it almost looks pseudo-human,
Yeah,
like he's not wearing a Snake Eyes mask. He's not wearing a Storm Shadow mask. It does look like some kind of mask, but it doesn't really look demonic like
yeah.
some of the other Oni masks we saw.
It does. It's not
Um,
Kenta because the hair's different and
no,
everything.
it's
So
definitely not
yeah,
Kenta. Yeah, it's just it's a different sort of look, almost robotic kind of. But I don't really have a whole lot to add beyond that.
And again, with it being concept art, it might have just been vibes they were going for more than
Totally.
specific
Yep.
elements to any kind of script they were working from. Yeah. So
Totally.
then, right, Justin, this is the mind blower right now, and I don't think anyone's picked up on this yet. But if you cast your minds back to a Hasbro Brazilian investor day that kicked off, I want to say in like 2021. And basically, during that investor event, there was a presentation to investors that was kind of hinting at a Snake Eyes themed animated series.
Yep.
And I wonder if people are kind of like caught on yet. But this particular image, I'm not even kidding. I'll read out the clip description. So this was basically someone, his tank had been to the investor event, seen the actual the actual presentation, and described it to a T. And this is what they said. The clip was animated like what we usually see on a typical flashback scene. Moving characters to a static background akin to Mortal Kombat X endings could just be placeholder concept art, barely 2 seconds. Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are fighting a couple of enemies. Both their designs are brand new and futuristic. And then we get this like grouping of like descriptions for each character. We'll start with the location here. Top of a building, helipad question mark. Neon signboards can be seen in the city. 4th of July like fireworks, reminiscent of the intro of G.I. Joe the movie. Are you with me so far, Justin, on this one?
Yeah, I'm seeing some similarities here. Yeah, might just be coincidence. I don't know.
Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes looks a lot like a black Power Ranger, wears bladed gauntlets like classified series Storm Shadow art, most popularly known as Batman gauntlets. Silver visor. No weapon, just a badass kick. They've just described exactly what Snake Eyes is doing right there in this image. Storm Shadow looks a lot like Marvel character Crossbones. White high collar jacket, no sleeves. Like Snake Eyes, wears the same gauntlets. Dual wielding 2 tang hooked katanas. Again, an almost exact description of what Storm Shadow is doing in this. Now, this is where it like just locks it into place for me. Enemies, 2 males, 1 bare-chested, tattooed question mark, wearing Japanese demon masks, check. Bare-chested enemy wields double-ended Japanese shogi hook. I mean, yeah.
Exactly what he's got.
And the other wields a straight sword while receiving a knee kick to the chest from Snake Eyes. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. There's almost no disputing this is exactly the shot that they're describing in that post. It's word for word, image for image. It's precisely what we're seeing here.
So effectively, this kind of like answers that question as to what they saw during that event. I think a lot of people thought it was concept art for the animation. What it actually turned out to be was concept art for the film, used for like a pitch, I would say, for an animated series. So at least I feel like in this sense now, I don't feel like we've missed anything, or we've like missed out on seeing anything, because by the sounds of it, it was just kind of like effectively this image shown for a couple of seconds,
right?
With maybe some text and some other information on there. But like that, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's really nuts, and it's really cool to see pieces like that slot together so far after the fact. I think that's what I'm loving about this concept art in general. It's like 10, 12 pictures, but it has single-handedly taken all of these loose threads that we've heard rumored about for the past 10 years and kind of twisted them into a somewhat cohesive picture. You've got the Visionaries, you've got Mask, you've got Transformers, you've got the idea of this combined universe. You've got, that exact description of that particular image. So much of it is it's like a couple light bulbs going off as you kind of scroll through these images and be like, I can kind of see how this transpired in my head, what the process was to kind of get to the final result that we ended up in. Because so many times you see a film and you're kind of like, why did they do it that way? Why? And we still don't have all those answers. There's still plenty of stuff in the Snake Eyes movie I'm thinking about, well, why did they do it that way? Especially when we see this concept art and see what they could have done. But in many other ways, this sort of fills in some blanks that we had going from one step to the next, and helps kind of frame sort of the final result and sort of what could have been.
It's just nuts to me. And like when I think Pat mentioned, oh, what was that thing about Brazil back in like ages ago? I'm like, oh my God. And I literally raced to His Tank, searched the crap out of it to try and find that particular thing, eventually found that post, and was just like, as I read the description, my mind was blown.
Yeah.
I'm like, they are literally describing this exact concept art. They even mentioned
100%.
that it was probably concept art, and there you go. Like it just, for me, it was one of those really fun sort of like realization moments as well, and kind of going
100%.
like, oh, cool, like ticking a box basically for me is what
exactly.
it did. You did all sorts of good stuff for my OCD on that one, I'll tell you that. And then obviously kind of moving on from that, we'll just finish up with the last few images. We've got obviously the motorcycle scene done slightly differently here with Kenta involved.
Yep, Kento's involved. The motorcycles look a little bit more futuristic. The movie, they looked pretty much like just vanilla motorcycles, but these are clearly a little bit, souped up, a little bit,
A bit more Akira style, isn't it?
Yeah, again, some more of that cyberpunk, that some of those elements that are kind of strewn about throughout the concept art, but never really realized in the actual film, which is odd because so much of the film is straight realism, and then you have this Snake Eyes uniform at the end, which is kind of like, totally off the wall. It would have made almost more sense to see some of those threads woven in before you got to that end result. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty similar aesthetic, and I like the motorcycle combat scene in Snake Eyes. It's one of the things that kind of shown as being a pretty fun component of the film. And this is just kind of a different perspective of that.
Totally. And then, of course, we see the end scene kind of in a couple of shots here of him kind of walking out of the Arashikage temple with all of these kind of like characters behind him. Again, like kind of wearing almost like their chill out clothes and masks. And Akiko, I guess. I'm guessing Akiko could be Scarlet maybe. But
based on the colors, the yellow and black, and that's where the figure kind of wore. I think that's clearly... Akiko, and it's interesting to kind of see that final version of the suit, especially with those, gauntlets and kind of the mixture of kind of the bodysuit on top and the pants on the bottom.
I kind of like it.
It's a great look. I love it. I would love to see a classified version of this figure. We're going to get bunches of different Snake Eyes figures along the way. And I doubt they're going to be dipping much more into movie continuity when they do future classified figures, but this would be a really cool look for them to approach. Sort of
like when Star Wars do Ralph McQuarrie figures and stuff like that, right? From the concept art from Star Wars and things like that.
Exactly.
Well, that's all of the concept art. We've gotten through all of it, and we've kind of covered what we wanted to cover in terms of our kind of commentary on that, especially that image that was then ended up in the Brazilian. Oh man, like that's crazy to me. Absolutely really crazy. Cool. And yeah, big shout out to Pat for kind of putting that mind worm, that like little mind thing in my head.
It's amazing that he saw that image and like almost immediately was like, hey, didn't they remembered that from 4 years ago or whatever.
Nuts.
Yeah, it was really
Absolutely
impressive.
Nuts. Well, anyway, Justin, thanks for joining me, mate, on this little kind of quick movie news burst. We want to get together and do a fantasy casting for a future like G.I. Joe into Transformers movie situation, maybe. But especially based on that terrible article that came out not too long ago. We'll be doing that soon. Hopefully you want to jump in on that one, Justin, as well.
Yeah, for sure. We should do that soon.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
That's it then for this installment of the Full Force Movie News Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host, Justin Bell. See you next time. And as always, you know what to do at the end of these episodes. After 3, 1, 2, 3, Full Force! That's it for this installment of the Full Force Movie News Burst. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next time, and as always, Full Force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on X, formerly Twitter, @The Full Force, liking the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Full Force. We've also added a brand new Instagram, so check us out there as well, @The Full Force Podcast, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on any of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/The Full Force Podcast, or click on the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.